We're about to record. Okay. Hi, how are you? This is Dr. Damaris G, and this is Mindfully Integrative Podcast. Thank you guys for joining in on this mindful chat with Denise Caputo-Olsen. She's an amazing woman, energy healer, nurse, and a wonderful friend. And I just can't wait for you guys to listen and watch her. She has a lot to share. So thanks for joining in on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. Oh my gosh, Denise, I'm so glad to chat with you just before. And, I haven't talked to you in a little bit and I missed you dearly. And I can't wait for others to know more about you. So, what's a general fun fact that people may not know about you?
A general fun fact about me.
Ooh, just something fun.
This is a funny one. I mean, I. Everyone thinks I'm so extroverted, but the truth is that I'm super introverted. I laugh. My kids are like, "That's not true. You talk to everybody." And I do. I like the interaction, but when I'm around people for any period of time, I have to go home and recharge. Like I have to have my alone time. I need to be able to reset my energy and, just balance everything out.
And reconnect and kind of like bring yourself back in the bubble. My
Yeah.
my little one right now is we're calling him the empath now because he needs to play for a little bit and then he needs to go back in his little corner and recharge. I
It's
think that's important though. I mean, you
And
it's
as a
important.
mom, right, being able to identify that and give your kids the space to do that because a lot of times you don't notice that in your kids.
Oh, for throughout. And you're a mom of three.
Mhm.
So you must have had your share of trying to balance the energy with them alone. I mean, you're an energy healer, but how was that as a mom? I mean, I call you integrative mom, but was that
Well, this has
challenging
been
as a
a
mom?
journey. So when they were babies, I wasn't as educated about the
Different things.
the different options. My husband, ironically or not, just intuitively knew about all of these things before they were popular. So, I mean, my oldest is 28 years old and Tori is 23. And we were getting organic vegetables and fruit shipped to our house at that time.
Really?
We didn't have two nickels to rub together, but it was so important to him. And the other part was dairy, not giving my babies dairy at all, even when they were able to have milk. Especially Tori, he was crazy he was like, there's so many hormones in the milk, and
Hmm.
so as far as those things went,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
Kind
feel
of
like we were
started off that
a bit
in a like a beginning, like he kind of was intuitively figured that out. And I know that, that story, if you want to share it, you can. If you don't want to share it, I understand. That he already knew. He was kind of already watching out for them.
right.
And he always is watching out for them.
Yes, yes. And so that started me along that thinking because I honestly grew up with a lot of processed food. There was, my mother didn't enjoy cooking. She worked. So if she did cook, it was something like literally just thrown together, canned vegetable, all sorts of things that now they didn't know. I mean, it was a matter of convenience 50 years ago. They didn't know
Yeah.
that the lack of nutritional value or even the damage that it could be doing. So as a mom, I mean, I cooked more than her, but I didn't know all these other things. On the energetic side of things, I have always been very intuitive. And with the kids, it's it's important for me to allow my kids to grow into who they're meant to be rather than saying you have to. I mean, certain things they have to do, right?
Yeah. But the generally trying to
There
be
are
themselves.
boundaries, but respecting who they were and what they, what their needs were. I wasn't always good at it, but it was a little different from the traditional way of raising children.
But you're a single mom, dealing with taking care of 3 kids. Like
Yeah,
that's hard, I mean, and you did the best you could, and you're a nurse also, so you had the intuitive nature, and then to build
right.
up, an energetic field also and protective field for them. That's, that could only be, you do the best you can, and you're motherly and loving and also having to be responsible.
I know, I know. It's funny when you're going through something like that. I mean, you can share. I guess I'll share it. I lost my husband when my children were very young. He was a fireman that died on 9/11, and the kids were 8, 3, and 18 months old. So
Oh,
looking at my grandson right now and my daughter-in-law and my son, I'm like, it's so much work. It is so much work. How did I do that by myself? I don't know how I did it.
did.
When you're in it, you do what you have to do, right? Like you don't I didn't know any. I mean, I guess I knew what it was like to have my husband there, and it was definitely way harder, but there aren't any other options. So you sort of just do what you have to do.
No, I mean, you did what you had to do. You grieved when you had to grieve. You had to live through, but you not only like saw another side of it, like you got to be, take care of your family, but then you also not only chose to be a nurse, but were you a nurse all throughout the last 20 years or so, or did you
No,
become a
I
nurse?
didn't. When after Jeff passed away, I didn't go back to work. I was
Right.
actually, I was supposed to be at work the day that on
Mhm.
September 11th. And
Mhm.
he called. I was working per diem, but in the hospital I had always worked in. So it was just a
Yeah.
matter of I worked full time, but created my own schedule.
Yeah.
So he called and said that he was staying for someone. He was working for someone in the firehouse because they had jury duty. So he was like, oh, you can stay home. You don't have to go to the hospital. So after that, I decided to stay home with the kids. My daughter, especially, only knew he went to work and didn't come home. So the thought of me leaving for work was really frightening for her. Um, so I stayed home for a while, and then that was how I got into the yoga. It was, it's just the way things evolve.
Developed and changed, and probably how you process, but then now you're like, I mean, not just being a nurse, but like now you've taken it to an element of healing yourself, but then you've kind of helped heal other people, and now you're doing it in this energetic way. Kind of talk to us a little bit about how that is for you, and how like what where you're going with that, or how did you start with that?
Ugh, this story is always, I mean, it's so, I could get so long-winded, but the bottom line is,
However much you'd like to talk.
the bottom line with my journey is that it came out of necessity. It wasn't, oh, I want to study yoga, or I almost was forced, I guess, by the universe into all of these different places. And they were, in hindsight, it's so easy to look back and connect the dots and see how
Yeah.
perfectly things align. As you're going through it, it feels really messy and painful, and almost like, uh, why me, or confusing. But I started out working. I was just trying to heal my own grief. So I would go to talk therapy. I would go to, I would work out. Everybody's like, well, you got to move your body. You have to talk to well, so I tried all of those things. I would go to church. I would go to the gym. I would go to my therapist. And it felt like there was always something out of balance. My body might feel good, but my mind wasn't right. I was struggling with the whole Catholic religion, and the way that they addressed grief and all of that. And just at the point where I was like, what the hell? Like, how am I ever supposed to make this better? I had been working out like a crazy person, and I needed to stretch. So I saw, oh, there's a yoga studio. I'd never done yoga in my life. Stepped into the studio, laying on the mat, just tears. And I'm like, Jesus, thank God it was it was a hot yoga studio too.
Oh, thank God it was hot yoga, right? Oh
And
my
I had
gosh.
no idea about hot yoga. So I'm like in sweatpants. These people are half naked. They're twisting themselves into pretzels. I can't even touch my toes. It was mind blowing. So I
Ugh.
lay on the floor. I'm laying in Shavasana. Tears are coming. And I'm like, thank God I'm so sweaty. Nobody knows I'm crying. But when I left, I felt so light. And I was thinking to myself, wow, I haven't felt like this for no reason in years at this point. It was about 2 years after my husband died. And I'm like, could it have been that yoga? Or maybe it's just time, right? Everyone
Mhm,
says
mhm.
time heals everything. So I wasn't going every day, but whenever I went, I had that feeling. So then I stopped doing everything else and just wanted to do yoga all the time. And of course, once you start practicing yoga so intensely, your diet changes, you pay more attention to energy, you're surrounded by people that have a different perspective on life. So your awareness expands. And from
Mhm.
there, I decided, oh, this is like the key to happiness, right? So I went and got my teaching certification, and one thing led to another. I started working with the military, and that was a whole
I
that
know that's how we found each other.
yeah.
You taught me a class. I'm a veteran, and I
Mhm.
found yoga in the darkest times. And I think when they told me about yoga when I was like my trauma stuff, they were like, "Oh, it's movement therapy. Try it." And I'm like, "What the hell is this crap?" You know what I mean? And so I mean, as passionate as I am, my grief in another realm,
Mhm.
both because of 9/11, mine and my way, yours and your way,
Yes.
brought us yoga, but I feel like it brought us an awareness and a way of coping with things that the traditional side couldn't always do. I'm not saying, like we are saying, this is an integrative podcast, right? So it's a little bit of both. And you taught me one of my classes. I remember I went to one of the, and that's how we met each other.
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
So
I know it's been the whole journey, the whole grief journey has brought the most amazing people into my life, and completely different from I mean, I grew up on Staten Island, and I not, at the time I love the neighborhoods. I love that feeling of community, but there is a really, especially now, like a really heavy energy there. Um, there's that awakening into the idea that the way that you were raised and the things that you knew to be true, the only things you knew to be true, aren't all that's out there.
right. There's something beyond, like your consciousness has to go beyond what is right here. Even though they're in the present at that moment, you just haven't expanded. Your thoughts haven't gone, or people may think this is all they have. And they're like, oh, and it's just their neighborhood, but they're not willing to think beyond just that little box.
So it's and that extends into every area of your life. I mean, growing up, as far as integrative health, growing up, I have had eczema, like we were talking about, but I also had asthma,
Mm.
and would always get strep throat. And so I was constantly on antibiotics, on steroids, like whether they were oral,
Right,
topical,
right.
uh,
Oh, goodness.
inhaled
Right.
for my asthma, right? And not knowing at all any of the long-term adverse
Effects
effects of
like
all
immune
of those.
immune compromising and just like bone health, like just a lot of different aspects, the benefits versus the risks, right?
Well, and also not knowing ways to support my immune system. Like it was just like, oh, you don't feel good? All right, let's go to the doctor and get an antibiotic. Or, oh, we have an antibiotic in the
Maybe
medicine
here we have
cabinet.
an extra
Take
one.
that,
Yeah,
right?
that'll work.
Exactly. It wasn't like, oh, Denise, make sure you get outside and get some vitamin D, or don't eat the. I did know, we were talking about the dairy. I knew that whenever I drank milk, and think back, milk was the staple of the
Food.
food
A part.
pyramid, right?
Oh, totally. That was like on the bottom, isn't it? In the bottom back. That
Yeah,
was a normal, like, and then when you go to the lunchroom back, it was it's part of your thing. Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
I know. It's like so crazy to think of that yeah, the unhealthiness that the food pyramid represents is scary.
That's a whole conversation
That's
in
a whole
itself. The sad American diet. Yes, it
right.
is
But
very
I
true.
did know that whenever I drank a lot of milk, and I loved cold milk, but when my asthma was bothering me and I drank milk, I knew that I would be phlegmy and congested. So I didn't, I knew enough to be like, all right, better not drink that. Yeah, but I didn't have the tools to support my own
Intuitiveness.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, you got to realize, I think what it is the information has been out there, or the research, not even the research, it 5,000 years, just yoga in itself. Right. And then you're talking the herbal meds and aromatherapy and homeopathy, like all these other areas of integrative health. They've been around, but maybe some of them were researched, some of them weren't, but it's like they help, but we didn't always get that in our like normal dialogue of health between the doctors, and not just doctors, and it's not their fault. I'm talking about anyone throughout history, through our time. We probably just weren't exposed to it.
Right.
Now I think it's becoming a little bit more, shall we say, awareness, more open, and I'm one of those people that I'm like, yep, let's get into it. Let's talk about more more things. Like yeah, and you had an awareness. You probably just didn't, you were just like, oh, okay, I'm just not gonna have milk for today, and I'll let that go. And
Right,
then
right, right. And I also knew that coffee would help me to breathe more. And I wasn't a coffee drinker, but I knew that if I had a cup of coffee when I was in the middle of an asthma attack, that
mhm,
it would
open
allow
up.
me to open up a little bit, right? Now I know. And I mean, I was a kid when I
And
was
you don't know, you're like, well, why does that work?
what?
Right.
I don't know why it works. I just know it works, right? And another thing that I did intuitively was in the middle of an asthma attack, when you start to get short of, we didn't have rescue inhalers back then. So you start to get short of breath, and it's almost like you can go into of course, when you're a kid and you can't get your breath, you start to panic a little bit. But I knew that if I controlled my breathing, instead of being like, if I did a slow, controlled breath, that I could relax myself enough to maybe go to sleep or not get into that state of where I really felt like I was gasping.
Right. Right. Right.
So, you know, it's
That's amazing though. And then think about it now, how you used breath work in with your practice and with your clients and your,
mm,
patients, and probably loads of things.
yeah, I look back and I'm like, I've been doing this work. I've been on this journey since I was put on this planet. Um, Definitely the loss and the grief, pain, that trauma,
Hmm.
it sort of puts you like on the fast track, right, through all of that, because you're just looking for something to soothe yourself. And I think, that's what happened when as I continue to
But the
practice.
most amazing thing about you though is that like you still were able to get through the grief part. Like, and people say that about me too. Like, it's just like you have a choice to either go in a negative path or a positive path. And it's like you were like, no freaking way. I'm gonna get through some way for your children, for whoever, whatever your motivation was. And you
Right.
saw that. And I think that not everyone is able to see that. And I'm hoping that if someone's listening or watching is able to get just a little inkling of not, of your story, and just also kind of just not
Oh,
giving up, going
oh,
on a positive light,
mm,
seeing a little bit of light in that dark part.
yeah. I believe I'm divinely guided. I believe we all are, but sometimes we just, and however you want to see
Well,
that.
you're a beautiful woman, so I know that you're divinely.
It's well, I feel the same way about you. I mean, other people might not call it divinely guided. There's other, it always comes down to semantics, right? But whether you want to call them signs or whatever, there have been so many times in my life that I have felt hopeless. And in those darkest times, I know, I feel like everyone has to do this. Like, you're literally crying out for anything, like, give me anything that will help me. And when we pay attention, those things are usually shown to us, but it takes so much courage to follow through on it. To, it's like you don't want to move, but you just have to a little bit, right?
A
To
little step, a little moment.
little step, baby steps. That was one of my mantras, like baby steps. And a lot of times it was like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Is there someone in your life that has inspired you, or do you have an inspiring book that you can
Oh
share?
gosh. Honestly, the person that has inspired me since I'm little is my grandmother. And she was like this Irish German. um she died when I was 11, and she was so loving, but she was so devoted to to God. Not in a, I mean, she was very religious, but she was
Mhm.
also spiritual. Like, she used to tell me all the time, you don't, Denise, you don't have to. Now, this was a woman who went to church every single day. Like, that was her thing. When she was dying of cancer, the priest would come to her house so she could receive communion every
Oh,
day. But she wasn't fanatical. Like, she felt like, Denise, you don't have to go to confession, or if you want to, if you feel like you did something that was wrong, or you can just talk to God yourself. You don't have to be in church to talk to God, or So she made everything really easy, and she said it's all about how you treat other people. Um, and that's what she was all about. She would give anything. She dedicated her life to service. She was actually all right, she was a WAC, women in the Army Corps of something, around
oh, nice,
World War
nice.
II, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So
wow, that's amazing.
right, like, she just dedicated her whole life to service. And that was how, I guess,
You kind of like were
my
in tune.
idea was that you don't have to sit down and teach people step by step how to do things, because a lot of times the way that you do something compared to the way that I do something might be quite different. We might take different paths, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's the way that you live your life. If you are kind, and if you are um healthy and happy, and people see you living life in a way that is joyful even after you've been through such trauma, that number one gives people hope. Like, if she can get there, I can get there. The
Yeah.
other thing is that I how did you, what makes you so happy? How can you still smile? Or what, it makes people curious. And that's where
People
everything.
do. They always ask, right? Well, how are you smiling? Well, it's like, well, I know how to be with my sadness. Every day isn't perfect. I mean, it's a work in progress, right? And I think it's letting people understand that it's okay to not be okay, but be aware of that, right? And then also be okay to smile. Like, it's good to see the positives on, because when you're trying to get over those humps, right? You're trying to, I mean, you're able to sit with, the good and the bad.
Yeah,
You've been it, you've been in it.
that's that's I mean, yeah. So I think my grandmother, like I said, just the way she lived her life was,
Mhm.
and she was so human at the same time. I can't stand the way our
Authentic.
yes, she was authentic, but flawed. That's the right, like, especially in our community, the yoga community, integrative community, people tend to have this attitude of perfection, or like
Yeah.
putting yoga teachers up on pedestals like they're not human, that they've reached some kind of I don't know,
Enlightenment.
Buddha status,
Right,
right?
right, right.
It's so not true. They're just as human as you are. And I
Right.
love that about her. I remember her, like, every Saturday night, she would drink Pabst Blue Ribbon. And it was she had this beer that she drank all
Oh
the
my
time.
God.
And it was so funny. Smoking
That
cigarettes,
was her thing.
that
She
was her,
smoked every day.
right? Like that was her thing. And it was, like I
And
said,
that was her. I mean, but like that's part of her, who she was, right? And that was her authentic self. Like
no shame, right? No
you
shame
can't be
on it,
perfect in
not
a
trying to
wellness
be perfect,
circle.
just like, this is me. And that made her even more, lovable.
Cooler.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to like talk to someone about that. They asked me, and I wanted them actually on the podcast. And she was like, well, I don't have everything together. I'm just like, things are not perfect. And I don't feel like this way. And I'm just like, it's okay. I don't think that's not what we're going for. So yeah, it's that thinking of it is this way, or it's this pedestal think. And you're like, no, that's not what we're trying to figure out. How do you get through the real stuff on a daily basis? And what are these little steps or baby steps, like you put it, to get through the stuff, like to get through it, to become more optimal. I call it optimal wellness, but wellness is an encompassing of many aspects, and it doesn't have to, if it's perfect, you're obviously not in the right direction.
Right. And I think isn't that the glow? I think that that is becoming something more accepted right now. We went through that period of really focusing on being perfect. And I know personally it held me back because, like that person was saying to you, there was so many things that I was qualified to do, but was afraid because I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have enough experience, or this person is better at it than I am, and I'm not
Right.
good enough. I'm not ready. Growing up, I always had to have A's in school, and that it really, it limits how far you're going to get, because if you're always waiting to be perfect to start things, you'll never get started.
So
But
true.
I see now a shift away from that idea of perfectionism. I see people putting a lot of energy or wanting to be around authenticity and not having to live up to this insane standard.
As long as the authenticity is really authentic, I'm all for it. You know what I mean? Like you said, your grandmother is going to have her little, be who she's going to be. Like I want people to be who they are. Like
Yeah,
you curse, you drink, you smoke, fine. I'm
right.
talking about wellness in and many aspects. And if that's part of it, who you are, that is part of who you are. Maybe you may not get some parts in there, and it may not be exactly, but if that's it, that's who you are. Right. And I think it's identifying those aspects. But I think, you're right. The authentic self is um more necessary. I don't know if everybody's willing. You still have to look through those.
I know, but you find
That'll
your
be.
people,
You do. You totally do.
find
Like,
your
right?
people.
Yeah.
When you become clear on who you are. So that's my real mantra in
Oh,
life.
I want to hear it. So this is you gotta tell us.
My real mantra is know thyself. Because, well, that has a story behind it that has to do with Jeff. It was the whole, I opened up mail. It was like right after September 11th. And because he was a firefighter, we didn't know where he was or what was happening for a good 4 weeks. There was always that hope that maybe they were in a void or something. So I had all these firemen in my house, and I didn't do, and like I was walking around in circles. That was all I could even do. And my mail came in, and for some reason, this is a piece of junk mail. I decided to open it, and when I opened it, across the top, it said "Know Thyself," and there was the whole story behind that. The temple. Why am I having a temple at Delphi, right? That's where that's inscribed. And so it struck me for some reason. Couple of days later, I would do this thing where I would scramble around looking for reminders of Jeff. And I found this book where he used to write. It was like a calendar, and he would put his little to-do lists in there, but he was a doodler, and he would always draw in the sidelines and write all these quotes, and I opened it up and literally written and traced to the point of almost tearing through the paper. It said, know thyself,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So I started out with, I'm just holding on to that. And then there were issues
Mhm.
around my in-laws and decision making and and all of this stuff. And all that kept going through my mind was, Denise, know yourself, like know yourself, trust yourself. And then as I went along this journey of rediscovering who I was, remembering who I really was before all of it,
Right,
even
right.
September 11th, um, it becomes a matter of being so brave to really get to know who you are, what has happened to you in your lifetime
Mhm.
that, you know, has brought you to where you to become the person that you currently are. What are all the relationships, the events, knowing the shadow side of yourself? What are the things about yourself that you try to hide from everybody?
Mhm.
Because though that's
I
where
mean,
you're,
you're making me cry. I'm thinking about listening to you. Just like I'm getting emotional for it. I'm
but
getting,
it's so true, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
really knowing yourself. That is where owning every single part of who you are, the good, the
Mhm.
bad, and the ugly. Because if you don't do that, no one else can do that. And you can't offer that to anyone. And it is the hardest thing in life. Most people would
It
rather
is.
go through life wearing a mask and trying to be somebody they're not, hiding the things that they're ashamed of. When the reality is, when we speak of those things, when we shine light on those things, we're not the only person that it's happened to. We're not the only person that feels that way. We're not the only person that reacts that way, for good,
Yeah.
for better, or for worse, right?
You're putting a light on a conversation that someone may need some help too
Sure.
along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it becomes that give and take of, I say this out loud and it heals me, but at the same time, it's helping you. And then
Yeah.
and that's what we're here for. That's the whole entire journey for all of us.
And that in yourself talking about the energetic fields, you're bringing out that, like others say, we're all energy, but you are an energy healer, that I know that's part of who you are, but your story and all of the parts of it, good, bad, and ugly, as you're bringing up, has made you to where you are and where you're going and all of the aspects of your life, right? And Mama Denise,
Mhm.
yourself, the healer, and it's beautiful. I mean, I'm just so grateful that you've been on today. I mean, I know we can dive into this on another episode, and I'd love for you on again. Um,
I would
you
love,
are just
I
such a
go off on
beautiful
tangents.
person, and I'm so glad some people get to get a little bit of your insight. Do you have one little extra? I mean, I love that know thyself, and just one extra tidbit that you'd like to share before we go.
Mm. Oh, if I had to say one thing to people that would make a difference,
I
I
like know thyself though. That one's a
I
pretty
know,
good
I
one.
love that, but I really feel that people, mm, be an observer of yourself. Try to see yourself as if you're looking at a child or your best friend, because we're so hard on ourselves. The way that we speak to ourselves, we would never speak to other people. If we did, we would be really lonely, right?
Mhm,
Because some of
mhm.
those internal conversations are very unkind. And we always we see ourselves through the most critical glasses. But if you can look at yourself as an outside observer and give yourself some grace and compassion, I think that that's when you're able to step out of your comfort zone and really expand your awareness to see past all the bullshit of what we spend a lot of time beating ourselves down or being fearful of not being enough. And meanwhile, other people look at us and they're like when I look at you, I think, oh my God, she's in the time that I've known you, you've done so many amazing things, between your DNP and your family and so many things. Um, and then I'm sure there are times where you feel not enough or
Oh, of course. Or
right,
just exhausted, or just like,
right.
what am I doing? Or is this resonating right? Or it's the conversation and the inner dialogue is never ending. And I think that's part of people understanding, this, my passion of the health, like circle of whole health, because people really have to really dig in deep to get healthier
Yeah.
in a whole encompassing way. And I think that's why when I talk to different people like yourself and others, it's like, yeah, there's something more that needs to be discussed
Yeah,
than
for
just
sure.
a pill, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so glad to see you. I want to, obviously talk with you more. I'm so glad you came on the show
Mm.
and given such wonderful insight, to the listeners and those watching. So I just am going to end saying, thank you again, Denise, for coming on
My
and, bringing a mindful way to each one of us each and every day. And thank you, listeners, for joining in on this Mindful Integrative podcast. Look forward to you guys coming on and listening. And do you have a way that people can contact you, Denise?
You can reach me on Instagram if you want it.
Okay.
Uh,
Sure. I'll have the links and everything
yeah,
in the
you
show
can get the
notes.
links. But the easiest way, honestly, is to email me. I'm trying to get away from the social media part of life.
Sure.
So I think I shared my email address with
Yeah. I'll put
you.
it on the notes for you.
And you can always, my phone is always on.
Yeah. It's soul and strongful, right?
Strong and
So
soulful.
strong and soulful at Gmail, right?
Strong and soulful NJ at gmail.com.
Perfect. I'll put it in the notes. Oh my God. I'm
Thank
so
you
glad to talk
so
with you. And you're such a wonderful soul. I
much.
love you.
Yeah. Good to
And
see you.